This is Kat Meyer. I'm the co-chair and sort of community manager for the Tools of Change conference that O'Reilly does. And I am in the very fun position of being the moderator today for what is going to be a pretty lively debate between Kassia Krozser and Joe Wikert. And Joe's taking the Amazon position in an Amazon versus Apple debate. Joe is the general manager and publisher at O'Reilly Media. He's also my co-chair at TOC, and he has also got a couple of blogs out there, or am I mistaken?
Yeah, that is correct. The audio was kind of chopping up on me there for a moment. Yes, I've got Publishing 2020 blog, which is just at joewikert.com, and then a Kindleville blog, kindleville.com, which is the one I've been investing in mostly because, again, I'm Mr. Amazon today.
Okay, so you're going to just not even talk about your iPad days.
No, I'm going to deep six that one.
Even though I remember them very fondly.
Yeah, we'll let Kassia address that. And Kassia Krozser, who is Miss Book Square, find her blog, which is awesome, at booksquare.com, is also a card-carrying founding member of Bezos's Ozos.
True.
Yes, and so I think this is going to be a good time to start to jump into things. The way this is going to work, it's a little bit more casual than most debates. We're going to let Joe start with his first position for Amazon and why it rocks, and then we will let Kassia give her response to that, and then we'll move into Kassia's points for Apple and so on and so forth. And then we're going to follow with the question and answer from the audience, so please do submit your questions in the chat room, and on Twitter we'll try to follow that as well. And if there's something really pertinent to what's happening at the time, we'll go ahead and jump in and ask the question right there in the moment as well. So
I think we lost Kat. So jumping right in here. So again, I'm taking the Amazon position here, and the first reason why I feel like Amazon is the superior platform is because of their multi-platform support. And as I mentioned parenthetically here, I felt like this could be reasons 1 through 5, and Kassia, you'd probably have to just concede the debate right here because this is the main reason why I've only bought one ebook from the iBookstore, and everything else I've gone back to Amazon for, and that is today I happen to use an iPhone and an iPad, but in the coming months I'm about to switch over to Android for both my phone and my tablet. And I know that by doing that I will have a number of different devices available to me, and I'll be able to bring my entire library with me. So good luck doing that if you happen to have bought a whole bunch of iBooks and wanting to use them on an Android device. So again, I think that this multi-platform support, there's a reader app for every device and platform out there, to me makes Amazon the easiest solution, and that's why I keep going back to them. Kassia, what do you think about that?
Well, yeah, that the challenge for Apple, and I'm not sure that they are eager to overcome it, and I'm not even sure that it matters in the long run, is that iBooks are only available on Apple. And yeah, I can see your reasons for not buying from the iBook store. I personally think it's an interesting experiment by Apple, and I think it got the publishing industry really excited, but it's not really moving the book forward. And I'm laughing a little bit on my end because you're talking about moving to Android, and I'm going to talk about Android a bit later, but I'm not sure that Android is ready for prime time yet. It's out there, it's on a lot of devices, and people seem to, I think the people who really love it the most are the people who are migrating from BlackBerries. They just think that Android is a huge leap forward, but anybody out there who's actually done anything on an iPhone, an iPad, realizes that Android is just not quite there yet. And I think one of the biggest issues is, well, there are two big issues. One is the Kindle web browser won't be Safari Mobile on the purported tablet. Can we call that a unicorn, or is that really just overdone? It'll still be the crappy Android browser, so you're just not getting that full WebKit experience. But the biggest deal for me is Amazon's insistence on Mobi just kind of holds it back. Basically, all people are going to get for the near future is a print book ported to digital. So it can be everywhere, and if you're a reader like me, that's great because I read narrative fiction. But if you're looking at the future of the book or you're looking for interesting ways to interact with books, the Kindle platform's not ready for that.
Well, if we can spend a little bit more time on this point then. By the way, there's some kind of background noise. I'm not sure what that is. Yaz, I don't know if the moderator, if the call moderator can help us with that. But Kassia, you raise an interesting point, and I think the problem, though, with what you're saying is where we are in the timeline of rich content ebooks, because you're right, there's not much in the way of innovation that's happening within the Kindle platform, that's for sure. I would argue, though, that there's really not much happening within the iBookstore either. Now, EPUB 3, I think, is going to change that, and I think that that's going to point us in the right direction. But I also think that Amazon realizes there has to be a richer platform offering as well. And so I'd like to think that the tablet and the Android platform that they're shifting to are going to help us head in that direction.
One can hope. One can hope. So do we want to move to my slide? Because I think this kind of ties nicely with...
Yeah, if we can just hit a couple of questions that have come up in the group chat.
Okay, sure. Let's do that.
So one person said something about, it's not really multi-platform if it's not EPUB. And that's a fair point. And then somebody else asked, does multi-platform include the Nook? But then somebody else also pointed out that if you've basically rooted the Nook or jailbroken it, you'll be able to do just about anything there. And that was something I had talked about earlier in a blog post, that I'm curious to see how open Amazon will be with the tablet that they come out with. Are they going to lock it down, or will it be open? So, time will only tell there.
Yeah, I read that post by you, and I kind of came out in the same place you did. Open is great, but there is an argument for locking down and having a really high standard.
Yeah. Here's a question for you, though, Kassia. Why doesn't Apple have an app for non-iOS devices like the Mac itself? I mean, I agree. That's a glaring omission, don't you think?
Yeah, and I think if we're just talking about the iBookstore, it's just a massive omission. There's no reason that they need to lock it down. But when we get into things like apps, et cetera, that's a whole different ballgame. And, I don't know what their plans are. Sadly, nobody from Apple keeps me in the loop on their products and their plans. But, yeah, it is a limitation. On the other hand, when you look at how many iPhones, iPads, Macs, et cetera, there are out there, maybe it's not the biggest limitation in the world.
Okay, so let's see what your first shot is here.
Well, so I'm going to move it, Kat.
Hi, I'm back, and I'm in control of your screen.
Finally,
so I think I just pushed you.
Okay, great. So this actually dovetails nicely with what we were just saying. With the iBookstore, which is where I'm going to start, Apple is using a standards-based technology, which is EPUB. It's an open, format. And then they're going to migrate to EPUB 3. They're using WebKit for rendering. Amazon, our dear friends, as I mentioned, they're stuck in Mobi, which limits everything it can do with ebooks and their future iterations. This means that EPUB allows for creative design, or as much creative design as the current EPUB standard is allowing. It's an open system that can iterate rapidly. Mobi, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's stuck in the 90s. It's come to the point, and I'm still kind of bemused by this, I'm not quite sure how to take it even though I understand the logic, is that Amazon is actually kind of scrambling to come up with formats that fit its vision, like a new type of PDF to facilitate page fidelity, but current PDF seems to work really well, so I'm not quite sure why we need a new type of PDF. Of course, the lack of EPUB support means that Amazon's limited in its ability, and that just means Amazon's really, really good at simple, straightforward books like narrative fiction, narrative nonfiction, but the moment you get to a book with tables, when you get to image placement, that sort of thing, that's where it falls apart.
Well, I agree to an extent that, and like you, I'm disappointed that Amazon is using Mobi and hasn't gone to EPUB. But that doesn't mean that they won't in the future. And so that would pretty much undercut your opening blow to me here if they do, right?
If they do, that might, yes. It depends on how they implement EPUB, when they implement EPUB. Nobody's hearing any noises about this. I jokingly predicted that that would happen in 2011, and it's coming up on October now. And if they're going to do it, when? And how is that going to impact all of the books that people have already purchased using the Mobi format? For example, as we both know, they haven't done a great job of supporting older hardware. You know, great features that were available on the Kindle 2 and then the Kindle 3 were not pushed back to Kindle 1. And is that going to be the same problem for the books? Will there just be a cutover, or will somehow EPUB be, will all my books be in EPUB and all I have to do is re-download them? So
Right,
there's still a lot of questions.
But the other thing I feel like the whole Mobi versus EPUB issue is a non-issue is because I don't think many, if there are hardly any consumers out there that know about this or even care at this point, okay? I think it does get more important down the road as we look to build richer content, and certainly it's important for publishers as we have to kind of build for two different deliverables here. But right now, I mean, obviously, there's millions and millions of Kindle owners out there that, you know, really are happy with what they've got, right?
Well, yeah, and like let me put it out there. I am a very, very happy Kindle customer, but I only read narrative fiction, a little bit of nonfiction. It's when you start moving into new kinds of books, and I think the consumer is way ahead of the publishing industry in this regard, because the consumer is used to using the web already. The consumer is used to interactive. They're used to multiple tabs on their browsers. They're used to all sorts of things. And as more and more readers come into the ebook realm, they're going to be expecting that sort of browser-like functionality to be ported to their books.
Totally agree. And I'd also like to think that Amazon's recent Kindle Cloud Reader app, which is, you know, very much HTML5 based, maybe they're going to skip right past EPUB and go to HTML5. And
I will applaud that, and because I love the Cloud Reader. I think it's a lovely experience, and I'm going to actually talk about that a little more in a few points, just because I've been playing with it a lot since we started this discussion.
Okay. All right. So why don't we look through the chat window here. Kat, did you see anything we need to go back?
Yes, and actually let me just ask this question that I just saw from Amy, and it actually really applies here. Kassia, Amy asks, if Apple has proprietary extensions, so is it really open?
Well, technically, if I were a standards person, I would say no, it's not really open, but it is way more open than Mobi. And so, yeah, Amy, good point.
Okay, so let's move on to Joe's next point about Amazon.
Okay, so here's really kind of how I landed back on Amazon's doorstep. I had bought the first generation Kindle back in, what was it, late 2007, early 2008, and fell in love with it and used it all the time until the iPad came out. And then when the iPad came out, I put my Kindle away and didn't touch it for almost a year to the day. And it was just a few months before that I saw somebody else's third generation Kindle and decided I needed to have one of those, and how have I been living without it, because it was such a dramatic step forward from the first generation one. So what I ultimately did was I bought that third gen Kindle. I've been using it every day since. I do all of my long form reading there, and I do all of my short form reading on the iPad. So I'm kind of using both, and that's also why I'm looking forward to Amazon putting a tablet out there so I can move off of the iOS platform entirely and just have all of my short and long form reading happening within the Kindle platform. But for the time being and for the foreseeable future, I was kind of skeptical at first. I thought, oh, I can do all my long-form reading on my iPad, and it's not going to bug my eyes. And it really didn't. But the weight of the iPad, just the inconvenience of it, I mean, that Kindle is so slim and lightweight because it's based on e-ink. I've come back to it, and I use that particular device and that screen just as much as I do the tablet at this point. So I think that's a big hole in Apple's lineup. I mean, yeah, there's people that are reading longer form content on an iPad, but it's not the best experience, that's for sure. Kassia?
Oh, totally agree. As I'm going to keep saying this, I'm a very happy Kindle device customer because of the way I read. But statistics, unfortunately, tell me that I'm not a typical book customer. Book customers apparently prefer nonfiction. I don't get that, but that's what they do. And nonfiction books, as a rule, tend to come in all sorts of flavors, all sorts of formats, all sorts of different layouts. And the Kindle e-ink device simply cannot support that kind of reader at this point in time. It's just not robust enough. Again, getting back to, I hate to rag on Moby because I'm sure the people who developed it are very nice, but it gets back to the fact that you just can't do much with it. So again, what we're talking about is just as iBooks being available only in the Apple ecosystem, the Kindle limits the Kindle format is actually limiting the number of readers who can come into it because it's still ruling out all those people who are looking for tables, they're looking for images, they're looking for really graphic, gorgeous books. They just can't get that on an e-ink device.
That's true, although they're going to get it through Amazon on their tablet, and actually they can get it through the Kindle app on the iPad today, right?
To a degree, remember, but Moby is still the limiting factor here.
Well, yeah, although the other thing I feel about that is that Amazon has delivered a terrific product for today's needs and content. And again, I agree with you that if they were to just sit back and not evolve what they've got, then, yeah, they're going to get their clocks cleaned at some point. But for what people are interested in buying today, I think that they're very much in the sweet spot.
Yeah. They are.
Was that a sarcastic yeah or what?
It was a half sarcastic yeah. This gets back to the point I made about the consumer and the reader they're already reading on the web. They're already used to a certain degree of interactivity. They're already used to the ability to flip between tabs. So as these readers come into this marketplace, and we know from statistics, which I should cite facts, but I have none in front of me. That
typical Apple fan.
Yeah, typical, absolutely. It's all about the love and the pretty device. But
That's
we know
right.
that as these readers move into the book world, they're going to have expectations that Amazon is not yet ready to meet. If we have this conversation in a year, it may change very much. But right now, Amazon is really focusing on a particular type of reader, for which I am thankful because I am that reader. But as new readers come in, the experience for them is just not there yet when it comes to the Kindle ecosystem.
Yeah, but I think you and I and a lot of us in this industry are impatient about, how's this going to evolve and why can't we have all this functionality now? I've been very outspoken about that, but I do think that there is something to be said for where the customer base is today, where the interests are. And Amazon has some growing up to do in that regard, I think, in terms of what they'll be able to support and enable. So I agree with you there, but I think for where we are today, they're doing a terrific job. And if I could just pivot for a second here, there's one question I saw that I'd like to address from Rebecca asking what happened to the whole exploring into color e-ink, and Amazon seems to have abandoned that for the tablet. If I could just mention for a moment, it was probably about 2.5 years ago, I was at e-ink's headquarters in Cambridge, not too far from O'Reilly's offices, and got a walkthrough and a demo by the fellow who was the CEO there at the time, and he showed me both color e-ink as well as e-ink that allowed for animation. Now the one-color e-ink that allowed for animation was just in like 1/4 of the display because of, I think, whatever the engineering required was behind it there. They weren't able to do it at that point for the full display. And it was actually kind of cool. There was a bit of latency, so it wasn't as smooth as you'd like, but it wasn't bad. The color e-ink, on the other hand, looked very washed out. Kind of reminded me of sort of the Ted Turner colorized old movies, you know, where you can tell that something's been done to it and it's not as sharp as it would normally be. But, you know, they were telling me at that time both of these would be out within the next 6 months. And here we are at least a couple years later, and it's not there. So clearly they just weren't able to come through with that. And with Amazon sort of relying on that as their display technology, they just couldn't get there. So you saw Barnes & Noble opted instead for just a traditional LCD, which Amazon decided not to do, at least at that point, and obviously they will with the tablet. So just wanted to hit that question.
Yeah, and I do remember a quote from Jeff Bezos where he said, and I think there was some snarking in the publishing trade press about this, where he was saying that the color e-ink just wasn't up to the standards, or what the colors he had seen just really didn't meet their standards. And I think that's important to remember, is that, you know, you can do color, you know, you can do it, but if you don't do it well, it's not going to be a satisfying experience for the reader.
Yeah, I think that was the key right there, Kassia. You're absolutely right. Any other points we should go back to here, Kassia?
Okay. I think we're good to move on, and I'm going to start being more of a strict person about moving along. Right now, I don't see any really pertinent questions to that point, so let's go to Kassia.
And let's hope her second point is better than her first. Go ahead, Kassia.
Here's my second point. Right, Apple isn't just about EPUB. You know, I think sometimes when we have these conversations, we think, oh, well, you know, we're just talking about the iBook store. We are not. We are talking about an ecosystem, and what Apple has done, and I love this, is it's created an environment that allows creative minds to reimagine the book. It inspires creative thinking, facilitates creative thinking, and it's providing a platform to create the future of the book, to imagine the future book even. Nobody knows what this is going to look like, and, you know, we still have some really, you know, we have years of figuring this out. But an early example of this would be a book called The Elements, which I trot out quite often, or you can even go with The Wasteland, which is also by the same company. Names always escape me. And then if you want to use an everyday example, there's an app called How to Cook Everything. I have it on my iPhone, and I have it on my iPad, and it's moving us toward the cookbook of the modern era. It's actually usable as a cookbook. And, you know, then I look at what the Kindle platform can do. It can't give me timers. It's not giving me great internal links. It's not giving me multiple tabs of information. And about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, I got a free cookbook from the Kindle store. And I was pretty excited because I'm a kind of a cookbook geek, and it was an absolute disaster. It was, you know, the Kindle device was absolutely the wrong way to interact with this particular cookbook. The pages were a mess. The images were completely disconnected from the text. The index didn't link back to the recipes. Navigation was a horrible joke, and I kind of felt bad for the publisher pushing it out there as a free book, because if this was an introduction of their work to the Kindle consumer, it was a failure. Now, I went back and looked at the same book on the Cloud Reader, and it was marginally better, but it showed off, again, the limitations of the platform when it comes to usability. Every time I needed to navigate through this cookbook, I had to go back to the linked table of contents, which was fine, but it wasn't the way a person works with a cookbook. I think most of us, when we're cooking or after we've read through a cookbook for the first time, we're not looking for a linear experience in a cookbook. We're looking to get to what we need to get to quickly. And Mobi just limits what you can do with design and layout. Not to say that EPUB, it doesn't have limitations, but when we're thinking about books, websites, or thinking of books as apps or websites, that allows everybody involved to think creatively about what they're doing.
So, Kassia, can I point out the two flaws in your weak fangirl logic?
Yes.
Okay.
Because there were only 2?
Yeah, well, I stopped counting after that. So,
okay,
so the first one is most, if not all, of the terrific iOS ebooks you mentioned, I think, are standalone apps as opposed to like EPUB-based books from the bookstore, right?
Right, absolutely. That's where I'm saying that it's inspiring creativity, because we're moving beyond the iBook store. We're moving into apps and eventually web-based reading, which is, I think, where we're all going with this.
So if I think that's flaw number 1, which ties to flaw number 2, and that is Android. If Amazon were not moving into a rich, broad ecosystem like Android, I would agree with you. But the fact that they already have their own Android app store and they're curating that from the larger app store to find the best stuff out there, and that they're going to have a tablet that's built on that platform, will allow that kind of rich development outside of Mobi for sure, just like you can build an iOS app outside of the iBook store. So I feel like that's a non-issue.
But when you start talking about that, are the developers going to be there?
Absolutely.
My understanding is right now Amazon doesn't have the best relationship with Android developers. And, obviously there are serious complaints about the iBook store, but are we going to be getting the same level of creativity there? We don't know until this actually happens.
That's true. By the way, looking at the group chat here, if we can be clear with everyone, you and I are buddies, right?
We are buddies, absolutely.
Yeah. And you make as much fun of me as I do of you, and you're often very right with your poking at me. So, to your point about, I think you raise a really good point that today it seems like it's more lucrative for developers to write for iOS than Android, and I think that's been a problem. I'd like to think that having a big name like Amazon backing it and again, curating apps is going to help influence that, but only time will tell there as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to push you to the next. I'm going to push you guys to the next point.
Oh.
Okay.
Joe has another point about Amazon.
Short-form content. I also saw something about this streaming by in the group chat window. Kindle singles. I think this is something that's been kind of overlooked, and I really feel like Amazon is going about this all wrong, by the way. Unfortunately, they tend to equate short with cheap, and if anything, I really feel like they need to kind of pull that pricing aside and think about it separately. But first of all, short-form content, I think, is a wonderful thing for us all to be looking at in this industry. And one of the examples I love to use in the Kindle single space is this one by Larry Dignan that came out in the initial wave of singles. I think it's called The Business of Media. I recommend everybody read it. I have no benefit in saying that. I'm not getting a kickback or anything. I do know Larry. I think he's super bright. He's a blogger for ZDNet, and I think he wrote a terrific book. The reason I bring it up as an example is you can read this thing in less than an hour, and you're going to find you walk away with as much knowledge, wisdom, insight, whatever you want to call it, as you would from a 300-page business book on the same topic. So what they did here is they went ahead and created, I think, a new approach within the store for shorter form content. And maybe what they don't realize is they're able to take what's almost like the Cliff Notes of different themes, and instead of having an author basically increase it to a 300-page traditional book, just write it in the format it needs to be and the length it needs to be. And maybe you even charge more because you're saving me time. Larry's single, I think I paid $3.99 for, and when I reached out to him, I told him I'd have paid him $10. It's too bad that Amazon has this ceiling of $4.99 for the singles, and I hope they rethink that. But ultimately, I love it that they're not just about the long-form content. They're building a platform now for short-form content. And I think it's kind of funny that Apple loved it so much that they've copied it themselves. So over to you, Kassia.
Oh, yeah. A few years ago, I was actually, this was at the first TOC party. It was an unofficial party, but it was a very well-attended party. I think what I did was I cornered half a dozen people and said, why aren't we getting more literary magazines, more short-form content, in the Kindle store? And I kept, I said, people, you guys need to do this, you need to do this, you know, you're the future. And I'm really happy to see it's happening. I think, you know, particularly for commuters and other readers, people who just aren't looking for a novel, short-form content is great. But I'm not sure that that's an advantage. I mean, I'm not sure that that's a winning feature, because again, we're starting to look at things like Electric Lit on the web, who are really aggressive and doing really interesting things to the point where they're building their own platforms. And you know, I cannot imagine that we're not going to be seeing more really interesting web-based sort of things, which, you know, yes, the eventual tablet will access. But right now, that's just not a compelling thing to me, even though it's something that, as a reader, it's very exciting. But as a winning point, I think short-form content is being done really well. You've got the Atavist, you've got Byliner, you've got Ars Technica, all doing similar things, but they're doing it more with the web and other ways. So Amazon, yeah, that's a great thing, but is it the great thing?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's revolutionary, but I think you mentioned earlier you don't feel like Amazon is helping moving things forward here with any sort of innovation. And I think that's one example where, again, Apple loved it so much, and somebody in the group chat was asking for the name of it, and I'm looking for it on my iPad. I've deliberately tuned it out because I can't remember what Apple calls it, but it's there. It's in the iBook store. If anybody knows it offhand, they wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I don't know offhand, and that's, you know, like I said, I'm not an iBook store customer for various reasons.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Let's talk about that for a minute here. Where are you buying your ebooks from?
I think I've said it. I am a Kindle customer, but I'm a Kindle customer who understands what I'm getting, and I'm not getting everything I could get.
What happened to the Apple loyalist I was supposed to debate here?
Well, I'm sitting here with my Mac and my iPhone right now.
Okay.
Don't you worry. I've got the stuff around me. I'm never too far away from it.
All right. Okay. Why don't we go on to your next point? What do you think, Kat? Is there anything we?
Yeah, and I think that speaking of that particular point, this might be a good segue.
So I'm going to talk about rapid development cycle, where Amazon is crawling in this regard. As technology, hardware and software improves, Apple has its products on the market pretty fast. You know, we waited forever. It seemed like we waited forever for the iPad, but we didn't even know what we were waiting for at that point in time. We just knew we were waiting for something that was going to be revolutionary. But they're iterating pretty fast when it comes to technology. Other companies in the space are playing catch up. All the Android devices out there are just not catching fire the way the iPad did, and I have my own theories about that, and oddly have to do with the proprietary nature of the App Store, but that's a whole other topic. And when we look at this eventual Kindle tablet, it still seems to me, based on information, and you know, I know it's dangerous to extrapolate based on rumors and, you know, half-baked news reports, but to me it seems like they are at best playing catch-up with Nook and Kobo. They're going to be, you know, it's going to be Nook and Kobo have fast page turning, they have social features, they have color. They've kind of moved ahead of Amazon's Kindle device in, you know, I'm not sure all of these features are what the dedicated reader wants, because when I'm reading a book, I don't want to be on Twitter. But they're innovating rapidly, and so everything I have read about this tablet suggests to me that it's more competition for the Nook Color than it is for the iPad. And which gets me back to my previous point: is will the apps and will the app experience and will the web browser experience, are they going to improve on their WebKit rendering? Are they going to make this just the same sort of rich experience that Apple has been offering readers for well over a year now?
That's a really good point. And actually, I wrote a blog post on Kindleville this weekend about how open, just wondering out loud how open the Kindle tablet will be. And honestly, I think as I thought that through, it helped open my eyes to thinking of two different markets at play here, right? So there's kind of the e-ink person, and then there's the tablet person, and yeah, there's some overlap between the two. But I think, again, for the foreseeable future, both of those are going to exist, and I feel like with the tablet that Amazon's going to come out with, if they make it too close, so in other words, if it's just like the Nook and you're really kind of limited to what you can do, then all that's going to do is, like you said, kind of be a color e-ink device at the end of the day, right? But what it will also allow the rest of us to do, myself included, is root the darn thing and open it up completely so I can do whatever I want. And that's really, I mean, I'm hoping Amazon just opens it to begin with, but I doubt that's going to be the case. But nevertheless, the fact that they're going to have it out there and it'll be an Android-based device means that there's a bright future to open it up down the road, even if you have to do it yourself.
And
well, I'm going to interrupt real quick. Kirk Biglione wants to know if Joe can explain how he sees the Kindle tablet differing from Nook Color.
Well, I think that there's going to be a lot of similarity there, right? And just like the base Nook compares to the base Kindle. So I don't know if there's going to be a heck of a lot of distinction. What I'm hoping, though, and that's just form factor hardware-wise, what I'm hoping, though, is that Amazon will innovate with how they offer it. So, a lot of people, I think that whole Kindle with special offers product slid beneath the radar. It's like, oh, it's kind of a weird thing for them to do. Why would they offer this device and charge, I think it's $20 less than the regular base Kindle there? To me, I think that's a step in the direction that Amazon really wants to head in pretty quickly, and that is having more sponsored content, sponsored devices, ways to basically lower the price and put, I think, more pressure on some of the competitors out there like B&N and their Nook. And so, we've all heard the rumors that if the trend line continues, we're going to see an e-ink device that's below $100 before the holidays. I'm kind of surprised we're not there yet.
Yeah.
I think that we may see one that's subsidized, and then before you know it, there may be other ways to get there as well. But I think the distinction really, in my book, for Amazon up to now versus the Nook is, what are they going to do differently? There's been talk also of will Prime somehow come into play here? So will there be free Amazon Prime when you buy this tablet, for example? Well, that would be something that Barnes & Noble doesn't offer. So, again, I think the device, yep, very similar, but I think it's all in how they package it all up.
Yeah, I agree that the Kindle with offers was a sadly misunderstood thing, and it's probably more genius than we're even acknowledging now. My household happens to possess one, and setting aside the fact that when my husband's, by the way, that was not a planted question, I should note. When my husband was sharing my account, the offers to him were very much not manly. They were definitely geared toward a female customer, and they did improve when he switched to his own account, and I thought that was really interesting. And I, to the best of my knowledge, have not purchased anything except for an Amazon gift certificate through that, but it was still a great, it was a great bargain. And if Amazon moves in that direction, keeps moving in that direction, and I have no reason to doubt that they will, it will actually be a really great consumer experience overall. So I'm not going to disagree with you on that. They just have to get it there, and they will.
Converting over to my team after.
I'm just going to interrupt and add at that point that there's some really good conversation going on in the chat window about the various stores of these two competing agencies, and I think that when we get to the end of the slides, we should definitely have that conversation because it seems that people have some great opinions. Yeah, so I'm just going to go ahead and push us forward to Joe's next slide.
I've seen some great stuff about the subscription models that I'd love to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. All right, so reason number 4. This is just basically looking back and saying, Amazon is an organization that's built around books, basically, and they understand them. And frankly, I haven't forgotten Steve Jobs' comment from a couple years ago that, what did he say, nobody reads anymore? It's an afterthought for them. And so I feel like Amazon really understands what they're going after, and as I said before, they may not have a platform that looks like it's well-suited for the future today, but I think that's going to rapidly change when Android is introduced in their tablet, and I think that the future is very bright there. So again, I just want to restate that Amazon gets books, and I don't know that Apple really does.
Totally agree. I did always think that Steve Jobs was being facetious when he made that comment because, you know, nobody could be that clueless, and he's never been accused of being clueless. And one of the things, and I think a lot of us who deal with the publishing industry or in the publishing industry tend to forget, is that Amazon seems and has always seemed to be genuinely passionate about the book product, the book, however the book is. And that gets forgotten, is they were started because they were readers. That being said, and I need to agree that I don't think Apple particularly cares about books. I think it cares a lot about digital content because that's how it makes a lot of money. And books are, and all you book lovers out there, just close your ears for a second, they are digital content. They're a product as far as Apple is concerned. But I get back to the point where the iBook store is, you know, it's almost a distraction in this conversation because it's a non-player. I think it appeals to a very particular kind of reader, somebody who owns an iPad, iPhone, but is not a heavy reader. It's the environment that Apple has. It gets back to the app developers who are able to rethink what the book is and make the book more functional for the way people live their lives. Now I get back to the example of the cookbook I talked about earlier. That is a usable thing. I noticed somebody in the chat was saying I wouldn't have a $500 device in my kitchen. I've got two in my kitchen because, you know, both members of my family, we always have our iPads and a couple other devices with us. It's a great way to cook. It's a great way to check recipes. You know, having a really good web browser in the kitchen with me, and it takes up less space than my laptop. These are things that I use frequently, if not every day. So it's not that Apple needs to care about books as much as fostering an environment that allows the smart people in the publishing industry, or smart people who aren't in the publishing industry but really are, to create great reader experiences that are usable and functional.
Yeah, although I think once that Kindle tablet comes out, you'll be able to have it in your kitchen, and you'll have a lighter, less expensive device that'll be able to browse the web just as well. So keep your eyes peeled for that one.
Yeah, and again, I hope so.
Okay. Anything to go back to in the group chat here, Kat?
Actually, there's some great stuff, but I think if we move quickly through the slides here, we can get into there's more conversation going on than questions. So I think that if you guys are following, you're probably seeing some of this too. So let's move on. Okay. Okay. Slide number 8.
I'm going to go real fast then because I do want to get to the conversation because you're right, Kat, it's great. And I'm kind of reiterating a point I've been making all along, is that Apple's not just about apps, it's about the web. I think Joe and I could agree because it's fairly obvious and because it's, you know, what it is HTML5 is the future, and we're going to see a huge leap forward in how we interact with the web as more and more developers implement HTML5. And one of the key points that I want to make here is right now Apple devices are the best mobile devices to experience HTML5. You know, you want to use a mobile device using a WebKit-based browser. Safari and Chrome are using WebKit. It's a state-of-the-art implementation, and the Android browser, as I mentioned, is using WebKit, but not quite as well as these Apple devices.
Yeah, well, I haven't made my mind up on HTML5. I definitely think there's a bright future there, but I'm a big believer in EPUB 3, to tell you the truth, and so here I am propping you up a little bit. But I think those are the two horses to be betting on right now, and that's why I really hope that Amazon is going to change their insistence on Mobi. By the way, love this one comment here I just read from Argris. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing the name right there, but I'm waiting for an e-ink smart cover for my iPad. That's great. I love it. Okay, should we move on to the next point then, Kat?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So my last point about Amazon, and this may seem a little superficial, but I think it's really important for the customer's experience, is take any title that you want and compare the Amazon page to what you see in the iBook store. And yeah, granted, Apple's all about less is more and simplicity and elegance and so forth, but I don't know. I think people generally like all the information or knowing that they can find all that information beyond just a bare bones description and maybe a few reviews like you can see on Amazon's catalog page. And so, I mean, clearly they've been in this game for 15 years or so and have spent a lot of time studying what works and what doesn't in both the buying experience as well as, just the user experience itself. And I think from a consumer point of view, again, that when I look for books, I just find Amazon's catalog pages to be so much richer with all the additional information and ties to other related products, which oftentimes, leads to that serendipity that I think is lacking in the discoverability issue that we face today. So I'm not saying Amazon has solved discoverability, but I think that when I go to Amazon.com and look for a book, I'm more likely to find other things that I might be interested as well than I am if I ever go anywhere within Apple's ecosystem.
Okay, this is actually your strongest point.
Really?
This is the point I like the best. Yay! Amazon has been, they launched it, was it 94, late 94? I think that's when they issued the press release saying that they were there, pay attention to them. They've had a long time to develop these rich catalog pages, and like you, Joe, I use them constantly. And then I go to a publisher website and say, why am I not seeing that same level of information here? The iBook store, I don't think, is ever going to rival Amazon, and it's going to be hard to say this, but I'm not sure that there's going to be a startup that does it either. It's just they have the momentum. They've been doing this for a long time, and the question I would ask is can somebody create something better? And this gets to the time thing. Time will tell if it can happen. Kind of agreeing with you here.
Okay, good. That was simple.
Okay, well, let's go to Kassia's last point, and then we'll jump into some of the conversation that's happening in the chat window here.
Okay, and I'll make this really fast because I've been alluding to this throughout, is that Android, it's there. It's got a huge install base. Can't doubt that, but it's just not ready for prime time. One of the commenters reinforced what I said about Amazon not having the greatest relationship with Android developers. Apparently, they're not liking the terms they're offered. One of the kind of Uber issues is there's some patent disputes that may weigh Google down. And the thing, and I cannot believe I'm about to say these words, Windows 8 seems like it might actually be a product worth paying attention to. It may actually give Android a run for its money.
There's something we can agree on, although I think not just Android, but I think iOS as well. And I've been impressed with what I've read this week about where Windows 8 is heading. So I think you obviously can never count Microsoft out. So I agree with you there.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm not even going to try and say that there's a winner here. I think
I will.
I'm not just being diplomatic. I'll tell you that you both won. You both won my heart. You guys both made great points, and I think that one thing I'd like to ask each of you, who do you think, and this is pretty loaded, who do you think wins the customer service debate between Apple and Amazon?
Kassia, why don't you go and I'll go after you.
That's really hard. When you go to an Apple store, the in-person customer service is a little overwhelming. Sometimes it feels like there are actually more employees than there are customers. which is amazing considering how crowded those stores are. I've, throughout my Apple experience, have never had a bad customer service experience. I understand, and I have not heard too many people complaining about the iBook store experience. You tend to hear more, sadly, complaints about Barnes & Noble, which surprises me. But Amazon has freaking amazing customer service. So that, they understand that the key to retail is great customer service. So, I don't know who wins there.
Yeah, I think they both have so many strengths. And Kassia, to your point about going into the Apple store and feeling like you're immediately pounced on, I wish there were more stores that got anywhere near that. I'm not saying everybody should be that way, but I've gone into so many retail outlets where you're ignored. And so I got to hand it to Apple for having a really fun buying experience full of knowledgeable staff. So, but then, on the Amazon side, I have never had a problem with ordering anything or having to return something, and everything I've ever bought from them has come right on time. And of course, how can you beat the the immediacy of buying a Kindle book? And there again, Apple offers that immediate ebook delivery as well. But I think it's a tough one to call a winner on there, Kat.
Wow, and I guess I'm like the one person in the world who can walk into an Apple store and not be pounced on. So I was clearly thinking that Amazon won in that area just because they are so good with their online customer service. But good point, the in-store thing for everyone but me at Apple sounds like it's pretty good. I'm just going to ask a question. I just saw that Matthew had. Which ebook platforms will support the full EPUB 3 spec, especially since no one really supports full EPUB 2 spec?
Well, I'll jump in there. I would imagine that Apple is ultimately going to do that. They've already started to support some of the EPUB 3 functionality. That's why you can see some products out there today, and they have for a while. I think you may see some of the other sort of non-major players out there. I know the IBIS reader is, I'm sure, going to be huge with EPUB 3, but yeah. I would imagine, if Apple's smart, they should support every bit of the 3 spec.
I agree on that one. I think, as Matthew Diener in the chat room is noting, that EPUB 3 is taking full advantage of HTML5 capabilities, which it just brings the standard so far ahead that EPUB 2 may have seen. May just seem like an incremental step, not worth the time. I have no idea what the logic was there. But EPUB 3 for readers is going to be a huge, huge step forward, and I can't imagine Apple not just embracing it wholeheartedly, or Amazon for that matter.
Okay, I'm then scrolling through. Excuse my quietness here. To go back a little further in the chat room conversation, there was very much discussion going on regarding the retail experience, but also what the online stores, including the point about discoverability, what each of the online stores for Apple and Amazon do and don't do correctly. What do you guys, can you address that a little bit? Just think Amazon is doing things right and where Apple is doing things right, if they're doing things right.
Yeah, I'll go back to what I said before. I think discoverability is a big problem today. I think it's going to become an even larger problem tomorrow. I haven't seen any solution to it, but if I had to just compare where things are as of this moment between the two buying experiences, I just really feel like, and putting aside that I'm Mr. Amazon on this debate, I just again feel that the Amazon buying experience offers a lot more in terms of in-depth information. And again, Kassia's right. It's been around long enough, so it's got that rich history to it. But typically, you'll find so many more reviews as well on products on the Amazon site, even something that's come out in the last year or so. So they've had the same amount of time to build up reviews. There are exceptions to that, but if I want to know what people think about a product before I buy it, Fortunately, I'm already buying all my ebooks from Amazon, as I said, but if I was going through Apple, I'd probably find myself looking on Amazon first to find out what the reviews look like.
Yeah, good point. I was thinking also in terms of the user experience, and Apple's really, really big on user experience. Kassia, in particular, do you think that that's part of the user experience? I mean, outside of the device itself, shouldn't the user experience in trying to find a product be included?
Yeah, and I am, just as you're the only person on the planet who can't get Apple's attention in the store, I'm the only person on the planet who still hasn't figured out how to work iTunes. I understand from many people that it's easy, but I look at iTunes and I find it to be just a confusing mess. And sometimes Amazon changes things around on their site, but I do find that that they have A/B tested everything on their site to the point where they really are very much focused on user experience. Now, when you get into things like apps on Apple devices, because they have such high quality control, most of the apps I've used have had pretty excellent user experience where they're intuitive. I don't need a manual to figure out how to work them. And I think that's when we talk about user experience, we have to be more specific as at what point in the process are we talking about it. When I'm trying to use an app, if it's not intuitive and workable, then the user experience is bad. So iTunes baffles me, but most of the apps seem to have great quality control, and they work really well.
And I'm noticing that we are at 1 minute past the hour.
Wow.
So the app is probably going to shut us down in a minute, but I thank you both. This was so interesting and really, really worth listening to again, so I'm glad we're recording it.
Thanks to the two of you and to everybody that attended.
Yeah. And Joe, I appreciate you taking the hardest position of all.
You're going to get the final word in with that, are you?
Well, no, I let you do that.
Okay.
Well, and I'd like to also, thanks everyone for listening, and also everyone who is listening, if you have ideas that you think would make for a good debate, and you have ideas for speakers that might be anywhere good as Kassia and Joe, please suggest it. I mean, we like to do this on a more regular basis. It's kind of fun to have a conversation where people are arguing points instead of just presenting something that's a topic. So send those in. You can send them to me, kmeyer@o'reilly.com, or jwikert@o'reilly.com, and we would love to get them. And I'm going to go ahead and just let everybody go. We also, someone had asked if there's a way to copy and save the contents of the chat room, and I don't know if there's an official way to do it. I think you can maybe do it by copying and pasting while the window's still there.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I'm going to go ahead and try doing that.
I think that's right. One other thing I wanted to mention, too, if I could, Kat, before we drop off, is we are in the process of launching a TOC podcast, and we've done a number of interviews and other pieces. This is going to be part of that, and if you go into iTunes, you'll find it today. Just search for Tools of Change, and you can subscribe to it for free, of course.
I'll never find it, but...
For those of us who understand how iTunes works. And also, I'll just throw out there, if you can make it, TOC Frankfurt, October 11th, should be pretty cool. Check that out at tocfrankfurt.com.